All right, let's get going. So, quick intros. My name is Justin DeBrabant. I'm the director of product here at Databricks, overseeing apps. My background actually is in databases. Initially did a PhD in databases. Used Spark, committed to Spark as an academic project. Spent some years, misguided years in finance and hedge funds. And then the last 10 years, I was actually chief product officer at a customer data platform company. And we were building data-driven applications. So to me, coming here and kind of overseeing apps is kind of full circle. And we'll talk about some of that and the journey Databricks is on into these data and AI applications today. So, and I'm joined by Nick. Nick, you want to intro?
So I'm Nick Heier. I've been at Databricks for this is my third week. So I come from the automotive industry. I spent the last couple of years launching them into the cloud, and the centerpiece of that was Databricks. So I'm going to bring some practitioner slides of some of the things that I experienced launching apps and how Databricks Apps has kind of helped solve some of the problems.
Yeah, when I reached out to Nick about doing a talk, he was still at GM, and I was like, you know, you're one of our great customers. Come talk about it. And he's like, well, I have some news. So we're excited to have him on board, though. All right. Forward-looking statement. You guys get this a lot. So quick agenda. So we're going to go through, this is technically like a kind of 101 beginner level course. So we're going to talk about why apps for Databricks, give kind of a 101 demo, super simple, how to build our first app. Then I'm going to kick it over to Nick. We're going to do best practices. I'll talk a little bit about what's next. And then we do want to leave some time for some Q&A. And we'll get to that at the end. So let's get into it. The theme of DAIS is data intelligence for all. I hope if you come away with one takeaway from this, is apps is data intelligence for all. It's about democratizing data and AI to teams that wouldn't historically interact with Databricks, right? Databricks is, you know, I wouldn't say it's complex. It's designed for power users. You know, there's a lot of power in the tools and products that we build. And increasingly what we're seeing is apps as a way to kind of simplify those interfaces, put these complete workflows in front of people that aren't going to use Databricks on a day-to-day basis, and still empower them with these data and AI-driven tools. What is a data and AI application? I think we all get this. It's an app where a lot of the value is through data and AI. And, you know, I would argue that, you know, pretty much every application is becoming a data and AI application. If it's not, everything's being transformed right now. And, you know, we get this question a lot, so I throw it up there. What's the difference between notebooks and dashboards and apps? There's a lot of similarities, actually, right? They're all just kind of different interfaces for, you know, either configuring workflows or visualizing data. What we see with apps, though, is apps as a way to bring together a much broader set of Databricks products and services, much more configurable, much more powerful. These are designed for very specific use cases and very specific personas. Apps can be whatever you want it to be, right? But still kind of in that same theme of democratizing data intelligence through higher order interfaces. So what is apps? Apps allows you to easily build secure and governed data intelligence applications directly in Databricks. So if we kind of figure out why that's hard, you know, everybody, maybe not everybody here, but you probably have some experience building an app in some way, shape, or form, especially, you know, if you tried any of these vibe coding tools out there. So let's say you vibe coded some simple front-end app, and now you need to integrate it, right? So now you need to integrate the auth and SSO. You need to define the governance and access around that. You need to manage the infrastructure and the containers that you're going to deploy this on. You need to integrate into your VPC because we're all enterprises, and this is an open internet apps. You need to deploy a database to manage app state, integrate with observability tools, configure. The point is that just kind of the initial development of that app is not the hard part. The hard part is actually productionalizing this in your environment in a secure and governed way. And so Databricks Apps really set out to try to solve that problem. At the end of the day, we are a secure and governed hosting framework deployed directly within Databricks. So it's managed in our serverless environment. We have built-in SSO based on your Databricks credentials already. We have built-in auth across all the Databricks services. So we make it super easy for you to go from iterating on this front end, this app, and then deploy that in the secure and governed bubble that is Databricks. So why Databricks Apps? Let's double click into each one of these. Again, powered by data intelligence, built on everything in Databricks, out of the box off an SSO, and now we're going to have one-click integration with our new database offering. I'm sure you all saw the Neon acquisition. We'll talk about that more tomorrow and how that fits into kind of our broader strategy and plans. But this was always kind of the missing piece of apps. It's great to have analytics, it's great to have AI, but you need kind of some operational backend, and a lot of apps need that operational data. The orders, the logistics data, et cetera, are really important. Secure and governed. So we're managing the containers, we're managing the infra. Like I said before, it's deployed across our serverless environment, 30 regions, all 3 clouds. We do resource level governance through Unity Catalog. So what we actually allow you to do is the app has its own service principal, and you can define permissions at the app level. We also allow you to use the user of the app's permissions, right? So the user of the app can say, I can access this data, and then the app can access that on my behalf. So we call that on behalf of user authorization. So you can kind of pick and choose between these auth models, depending on the use case and depending on the app that you're building. And then, obviously, the out-of-the-box auth and access logs for auditability, right? Really, really important in any enterprise environment. And finally, we're open. There's a theme of all of Databricks, open storage, open catalog, open framework. We did not go and acquire one framework and say that this is our app hosting framework. Instead, what we did is we supported kind of this open ecosystem of initially Python-based app frameworks. So Gradio, Dash, Shiny, Streamlit, backends with Fast API and Flask. And now we're announcing support for Node and React. So it's not just Python-based apps anymore. Now you can build these JavaScript-based apps. And we're going to continue to add more frameworks and more libraries on top of this. And then in addition to the actual libraries and frameworks, we have a bunch of managed open source packages that we deploy and manage automatically with your app. So again, seamlessly integrated, secure and governed, and bring your own framework. So what are customers doing? Well, Nick will talk about this a lot more, but it really is a range of things. It's anywhere from what you would expect in terms of interactive data apps, RAG chatbots. There's a lot of embedded visualizations in these apps, but the way you can think of often how these visualizations are done is maybe you need to run some pre-processing, right? So the data science team builds some configuration around a pipeline, and so you allow an analyst team to go in there and say, I want to ingest this data, I want to run this model, I want to visualize the results in an embedded AI BI dashboard, and then I want to write back to some DB SQL table. That whole flow is actually a really common flow. It includes pieces of visualization, includes running jobs, but you're doing it in kind of an end-to-end interface that allows it to be self-service. I assume most of this audience is data science and data engineering teams. How many of you feel that you spend a ton of your time just kind of doing manual ops, right? Like if you look at your backlog, yeah, lots of hands. If you look at your backlog, I guarantee there's these one-off requests, write some custom SQL, run some job, parameterize this model, whatever it is, it's ops, right? Ops is not how you should be spending your time. You should be spending your time building and innovating. And so increasingly, if the things you're supporting aren't self-service, then you become the ops team, right? And so a lot of the value prop for apps is to kind of up-level the interfaces and the workflows and allow the teams around you to be self-service, right? Apps aren't just for line of business teams. They absolutely can be. You can, and we use this internally. Our sales and go-to-market and marketing teams use Databricks Apps internally for a ton of different use cases now, including for stuff going on with this conference. But it's also just the teams that are adjacent to data science and data engineering that you're trying to empower to be more self-service. So a lot of our customers are seeing a lot of success just kind of manually or getting away and automating those kind of manual processes and ops that they were doing in supporting the line of business teams. Tons of Gen AI and LLM chatbots, right? Like, no shortage there. Lots of different things here. So again, the last thing I'll say is we just went GA. That's an announcement this week. We only launched public preview in November. I think Ali will say tomorrow this wasn't on his bingo card of the level of success that Apps was going to see. We've had over 20,000 apps created across 2,500 customers. And Apps is the fastest growing public preview product at Databricks ever. I would have said fastest ever, but there's another part of the keynote where one of the products got to $1 billion and they claim to be the fastest ever, and that's a whole different thing. So all I'll say is in 6 months, we got to 20,000 apps and 2,500 customers, and that's a tremendous amount of growth. And we're super excited for everybody here that has been part of that journey. We really thank you. We're super excited. We still think like this is very early, but the initial validation and pull from the market has been tremendous. All right, so let me get into a quick demo real quick. All right. So what we're going to do, this is our staging environment. I'm going to go in here. We're in the Compute tab. We can see apps. I'm going to create an app. So this is something that everybody here in the audience can go home and do, or do it right now. So as we create this new app, we actually have different templates that we support. These are essentially kind of boilerplate code that we have. We're actually going to be releasing kind of more end-to-end templates in the next couple weeks that support more complex use cases. But you can see here we have Dash, Flask, Gradio, Shiny, Streamlit, and we'll add a Node and React template as well. So you can select which framework you want, and what type of app you want to build. And then this is where you would configure the resources. So because we've already pre-configured the resources for the chat app to need a model serving endpoint, you would be able to go in here and select the appropriate model serving endpoint that you've set up. And now the idea is that this is some foundation model, so you have some model serving endpoint around a foundation model. Let's click next. And then you can see here, you can give the app a name, a description, demo, and then install. And now what the app is going to do is we're going to spin up the compute, deploy the code for this app. It takes a minute or two for the compute to spin up. We're going to get that down. We want this to be much more instantaneous. But you can see now here the metadata for this app. You can see where it was deployed from, the resources that you've configured. And then once this was available, you would see the URL and be able to click into that app. I already have one pre-deployed. It's the exact same app. And you can see here, this is the URL for that app. And so now, if we were to go into this, we could open this app, and we can see this simple chatbot app that we've created, backed by a foundation model. Right? So the point is, it's super simple. I'm sure you've seen lots of apps like this. The point is not that this app is the sexiest app that's ever been made. The point that it was really easy to deploy this in a secure and governed way, immediately connected to this model serving endpoint. Right? There's other examples in there. Again, I would encourage you to go and create your own apps. And like I said, over the next couple weeks, we're going to be releasing more and more of these kind of app templates that are much more fully baked apps. And we'll release them as open source, so you all can take them and tweak them and build them into your own environment. And you can see here that we could even go in and edit these permissions. We can go and add additional resources to this app. So I could say, I want a SQL warehouse, and I can configure it to attach to that SQL warehouse. So it's flexible, right? So it's super easy to configure this app, attach it to resources, add permissions. So maybe this was a logistics app, so I want to add my logistics team, and you would be able to add that team there. So again, the permissions of what resources the app can use, who can use that app, all seamless to create here, all deployed within Databricks. That's the point, is it takes a minute or two to deploy this app. and you can get onto building more. All right, how are we doing on time? Good. Okay. At this point, Nick, wanna?
Yeah, so from a practitioner's perspective, so why Databricks for me, right? So, it's not always easy to do the easy things easily, right? Databricks just certainly, Databricks Apps helps that, right? So whether it's, syncing your code or connecting to data or sharing your app, that stuff, as long as you have a little information on how Databricks Apps approaches it, those trivial tasks become easy, and then you get the best practices. Now, I'm not, I'm not some full stack wizard, right? But I understand business problems. I can code a little bit to solve them. So, but we know what best practices look like, from a core perspective. Databricks Apps isn't going to force you to do best practices, right? But if you want to, use Git and have a branching strategy and leverage environment variables and keep secrets secret, and have a proper dev test prod space, all you have to do is add a little bit of discipline, and Databricks Apps will make it low friction in order for you to do best practice stuff. And then as you go down, you start talking about some more complex tasks. I put debugging in this because debugging is always complex, right? But if you're doing some of the best practices and leveraging logging, and you understand a little bit about the code that Cursor wrote for you that you deployed, you can look at the environment variables and the packages that are installed and start your debugging journey. As we saw, there's lots of ML components. You want to integrate an ML endpoint into your app. You want to string together a couple of APIs or gather some information and kick off some agents or deploy an MCP server. That stuff, you're going to have to bring some skill, right? But it makes it accessible if you're doing it in Databricks Apps. So I'm just going to walk through a little bit about the pre-Databricks Apps scenario. So we're deploying apps in Azure App Services, but the first thing was exciting new project. You got some features to deliver for a release. And let me know if this sounds familiar, but the first thing you want to do, we're builders, so we just go start building, and you build locally, and you start adding some features. Maybe things get carried away. You add a couple of things that weren't supposed to be in the release. You run into a couple of problems, and the next thing you know, the release is upon you, and you've got to do the demo, and then you go like, great, I got to deploy this thing. But you got to go get the infrastructure set up, and you got to get a service principal, and then to do the deployment, I got to get a GitHub action, and then I do the deployment, and my Azure VM can't hit public PyPy, right? It's like, oh crap, so I can't get my libraries installed, so I got to do that on the agent. I got to copy it over, and then I get that working, and then it can't connect, to the data because there's a private endpoint, and then I got to get an SG rule, and then I got to get somebody who has access to do that, and then I get that fixed.
Nick,
and then my app
Nick
still
has
doesn't
lived
work.
this.
What's it? Yeah.
So Nick has lived
Yeah,
this.
right. And then my app still doesn't work. So then I go to debug it, and I don't have access to the logs. And guess what? My demo happens on my dev box, right? And I go, oh, maybe next iteration, I'll get a proper pipeline to deploy it so the customer can actually use the features that I work so hard on. So in comes Databricks Apps, right? I knew this was sort of coming along, and Andre from the Databricks Apps team, had reached out, and he said, let's get a half hour, I want to show you what we're working on. And so I started the meeting with just like, it's a complex environment, I don't expect it to work. And he said, we're not ending the meeting until you deploy an app. And literally, it ended in 10 minutes. We had an app deployed, and 5 minutes was, me using Homebrew to get my Databricks CLI updated to use the commands, And then it was like, oh, like this is completely different, So, my advice from Databricks Apps is do what Justin just did. You start with a deployment. Go pick a data app and deploy that thing and get it up and running. And start with that so you don't run into this, like, how do I get it in front of the users to meet my release deadline? And then as soon as you do that, follow the instructions. They're customized, to your app set up your local dev environment, get it running locally, change the title of your hello world, go deploy that thing, watch the title change, and then start going fast with your iterations, right? And leverage the security that's in there. Rewind back to the Azure, example. I had put SSO on top of that app, and then I got the token, I got to decode it, and then I figure out what roles they have. But I still have to code what that user can and can't do, what that service principal can do on behalf of that user. I've got to code all of that, right? So I end up with a gigantic switch statement of some sort. So, hundreds of lines of code to control access in my app. All that goes away. It comes baked in. You leverage UC to control. The user has access to what they have access to, and you can just worry about features and not security.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it's not just about the complexity, right? It's about getting that right, getting the security and the governance rules right. If you're kind of coding that from scratch every time and stringing together all these different services, it's really hard to do, right? So the point here is we're allowing you to innovate quickly, deploy this code to production quickly, but with the governance and security kind of guardrails in place, right? And if you do that, you basically have this safe sandbox. I mean, apps by default get deployed in a workspace environment that can be controlled by network egress controls, so it can't access anything external. You can certainly allow it through egress controls to do that, but the point is like, you set up your environment and then you're deploying the apps to that environment, and that environment is safe and governed and piggybacks on top of everything the Databricks platform has to offer. And so that security and that governance allows kind of a pace of innovation, so you don't have to worry about getting that wrong every time you deploy.
Yeah, and as soon as as soon as you're developing locally, you get something that works, like deploy that thing, flush it through. Don't let your local environment drift and get too far away. Push those through, let them deploy. Think about your apps as ephemeral. I mean, some of the app services on the Azure one, we would clean them out and redeploy them, and there'd be leftover environment variables and things like these things you can spin up and use and spin down, right? If you code it right, you're not hard coding things in there. You should be able to say, I want this branch deployed in that test environment and this branch deployed in this dev environment. Different apps in the same workspace or in different workspaces, it's all code. And hopefully you end up with, user demos and not demos from your machine at the end. So that's the iteration story. This is just starting to think about, the first thing that you build. And, my advice is just start with the simplest thing that adds value and just go build that and deploy it, right? So you think about, a new vehicle launch that's got a new battery, that's got a lot of attention about quality, right? And you've got a vehicle engineer who gets assigned this sort of task, of a vehicle that maybe has some issues. They're in a world where they're in a Power BI report and they pull a table out of there into Excel, and then they update some comments and a status on it, and then they hand that to a data engineer, and he does something with it to get it back in the system to populate a dashboard. It's like, no, it's just a simple use case. We just need a vehicle engineer that wants to edit a record, add some comments, make a status, put a timestamp on it, and then update a delta table. It's like, well, just add a simple form. And this vehicle engineer wasn't somebody that was going to be in the Databricks ecosystem, but this interface unlocks all these manual steps and gets Excel out of it. So you kind of get that use case up and running, and it's helpful. And then you go, well, I've got some supply chain information about batteries and what demand is like, and maybe what battery goes on to what vehicle. I've got a file to upload. So Delta Share would be great, but strained IT resources on the customer or on the supplier side. Great, let's just add a page, add a button, upload the file to a volume, maybe set some parameters and allow that person to kick off the job, right? And that processes. And guess what? It's processing in the same environment where you've got billions of telemetry sensor data endpoints coming in about the vehicles. So now you can marry those two things together. And then, hey, how about, you've got some customer verbatims about what they experienced with the vehicle. Like, I'll call batch inference or an ML endpoint to help you out with some classification there. And then now you've got a curated data set that's got diagnostic trouble codes from the vehicle, you've got supply chain information, you've got notes. Like curate that into something you can put a Genie room on top of, and then you've got natural language querying of it, and then all projects end in a dashboard, right? So embed a dashboard on top of it that connects all of these things together. It allows you to display it, right? So this is how you can start with a simple problem and just add and stack features on to really get momentum and create something that started out super simple, solved a problem, but ended up adding a lot of value in the end.
And it goes to the kind of don't boil the ocean approach to this, right? I've been in a bunch of QBRs for apps, and one of my favorite parts since joining back in December is just kind of going, listening to these different use cases. And so like I'll join these QBRs or these customer meetings, maybe with some of you in the room, and inevitably it's always well, here's kind of a long list of ideas, and like we've documented kind of some of the key things to do. And I actually really think that process takes more effort than just building the app, right? And so my guidance is like what Nick is saying here, just go build something, right? Like you don't need the PRD, and like just build something. I'm not saying you need to put it in production right away and put it in front of people, but I think that process of building helps create this flywheel and kind of improve these iterations. And then I was with a customer and we had this exact conversation, and they're like, okay, well, we're gonna compile some list of ideas, and maybe we can touch base in 2 weeks, and we can see what is the best one that we can go build. And so I gave them this advice. We still touch base 2 weeks later, and they were like, we have like 6 apps running now, and it's been amazing. One app we intended for a team of like 5 people, and there's already like 25 people using it. So again, it's the point, right? Don't boil the ocean, start small, improve and iterate. Apps really helps you kind of innovate at pace.
Yeah, so my first ask or thought was like, deploy first. So two main points to get out of my talk here. One was like, how many people can deploy an app before their plane lands, this week? So like just go deploy it first. And then secondarily is to brainstorm and walk out of here with maybe 30 different use cases that hopefully can make your life a little easier and add some value to your company. Or maybe you just get to build something that's fun, and that's enough. But as far as use cases go, we talked about the vehicle engineer and dashboards that maybe need to go 2 ways that are presented in front of executives. We've also had not just non-technical folks. I had a cohort of SQL warriors, and I had created this notebook that did some like pretty in-depth profiling of data, and I onboarded them to it, and they loved it. They ran it. They liked the output, and they went and SQL'd for a month, and then all of a sudden Slack comes in with people going like, what is this notebook thing again? Like, how do I do the inputs? And did I run the cells out of order? And what's my compute? And then that happened again. And I realized that like I love notebooks, but they're not for everybody. So put a simple interface on top of it that makes those decisions for them and just keeps track of what they've run. And then go to your Slack and just find all of the things that are in there that are automatable, things that end up, as messages to you just because you have a little bit of subject matter expertise, maybe some access that somebody else doesn't have, and you provide like a gatekeeper functionality, but don't really add much value to, go gather those things up. Provisioning project resources, right? Just make a simple form. Gather information, maybe you pull the project out of ServiceNow, get the business value automatically, provision a schema for them, set the access, hit the GitHub repo API, provision that for them, and then tag all this stuff along the way. And guess what? Like, why don't we reach into the system tables while we're at it and show that user how many DBUs they spent in the last month on which projects, and just integrate all of that stuff in there. So, by limiting the damage somebody can do with an interface, and also layering in some governance and accountability, you can automate a lot of this stuff, that could be really a drag on your time. Wouldn't you rather build something to automate it than answer all of those Slack questions as they roll in? So yeah, anytime there's gatekeeping but not adding a bunch of value, maybe you can put up some guardrails and allow people to self-service. Databricks Apps, is the way to do that. So.
Yeah, and I think the main point here is, or kind of a meta point here is, you all have invested a lot in Databricks, time, money, effort. You've invested in Databricks as a platform. You've gotten your data there. It's in the lakehouse. You've invested in models. 80+% of you are using Unity for governance. It's amazing, right? You've made all these kind of infrastructure platform investments. Apps really helps you connect that to more value across the organization. And really that's the point of this at the end of the day. It's not technology for the sake of technology and data for the sake of data. It's we need to kind of drive more data-driven, more AI-driven business decisions that really have an impact, and apps can accelerate you doing that beyond just you all running the queries or the notebooks or the models or whatever. So I want to leave time for I'll do a lightning talk on the roadmap, and I'm happy to answer any other questions around this. 3 themes that we're going to focus on over the next couple quarters. Scalability. Right now, apps are a single instance. We're looking at larger instances. We're actually going to release that in a couple weeks. And then also horizontal scaling. So being able to auto scale out and down based on usage. Out-of-the-box observability for these apps. So as you create these production-ready apps, how do we create the right observability around that app? Not just uptime, but also performance, resource consumption, et cetera. And then a lot more around governance, implementing some of these best practices, this idea of enforcing that apps must be backed by Git and checked into code, better and kind of more visibility around audit logs, things like that kind of help the governance of apps as hopefully the adoption explodes across the organization. So those are the main 3 themes that we're going to be investing in over the course of the next couple quarters. And with that, we have about 6 minutes. I think we're doing pretty good. So why don't we, actually we have 2 mic stands right there. If anybody has questions, we're happy to take them.